At this point, we're going to bring together two lines of discussion that might have seemed completely separate from one another. We've been looking at waveforms in prot. We first looked at sine waves and then looked at pitch in human speech. And then we turned to the distribution of consonants in English. Now we're going to look at the phonetic realization of different types of voicing contrast, voicing and aspiration contrast, both in English and Thai. And the way we're going to do that is by looking at waveforms in prot. So we've talked about English, which has the two-way contrast between voiced and voiceless stops, bat versus pat, along with an allophonic rule that supplies aspiration to English voiceless stops, basically word initially and unaspirated elsewhere, although in one of our discussion sections we'll talk about the finer details there. Aspiration is not contrastive in English. It's predictable, therefore not contrastive. But there are languages in which it is contrastive, and Thai is one such language. And again, in discussion section, we'll be listening to and looking at some Thai voiced and aspirated stops. So Thai has a three-way contrast between voiced, voiceless unaspirated, and voiceless aspirated sounds. And what that means is you can find all three types of sound in the same phonetic environment at the beginning of a word, like in the examples that we've been looking at. So the two languages have the same sounds, but aspiration is contrastive and creates minimal pairs in Thai, but not in English. So to chart this out in terms of phonemes and allophones, English has the two phonemes, ba and pa, and then there is an allophonic alternation between voiceless unaspirated and voiceless aspirated in English. In Thai, on the other hand, in the same environment, you can find fully voiced ba, voiceless unaspirated pa, and voiceless aspirated pa. So, moving to the phonetics, the three-way contrast amongst ba, pa, and pa in both languages can be characterized in terms of voice onset time. Voice onset time is the interval of time between the release of the stop closure and the onset of voicing. And this interval of time can actually be negative because voicing can start before the stop closure, as in a voice stop. Or it can be positive because voicing starts after the release of the stop, as in an aspirated stop. So we would have negative, zero, and positive. So here are some diagrams that might help you to see this. So we have closure, so the lips or whatever articulators are closing. So if we're thinking like a appa, first you have the vowel ah, and then closure, and then full blockage for a voice stop. And then in the voice stop, this is showing the vocal folds vibrating during closure and then through into release. And in all cases, there's voicing here because that's when the vowel's starting. So voiced plosive, that's another word for stop. Voiceless unaspirated plosive, we would have the voicing start pretty much at the same time as the vowel, and there's no voicing during the stop itself. And then finally, the aspirated sound, the voicing stops after release. Now, one interesting thing here is that not all aspirated stops are voiceless. Some languages, like Hindi, have voiced aspirated stops, which we could notate like this. So I have links here on the web page to files for us to look at in prot, and I'll just pull up a couple of those right now, and we'll take a quick look at them. Here are the three Thai sounds that I pulled up: Bakwan, Bakwan, and Pakwan. We're going to view those and edit them. Actually, we'll just be viewing. We won't be doing any editing. So here's the fully voiced one. And look at the beautiful waveforms we have during the closure. This is actually during the stop. So we'll play the whole thing first.
Ba.
Now just the stop. And you can hear the voicing. So this is the vibration of the vocal folds. So it's periodic. So there is actually a pitch here. That's the voice stop. Then the voiceless unaspirated one. Here is the release of the stop into the vowel. And you'll notice that this is the period of closure here, and here's the release, and the voicing starts just about exactly when the stop is released. So here's the voiceless unaspirated pa.
ปากปาก
And then finally, the voiceless aspirated one. So look at what you see here. This looks different than anything we saw in the other stops. This is noise in this period. This is the aspiration. And then here you can hear the whole sound where it's pak. And so after the release, there's aspiration, which makes noise. And then we go into the vowel, which has the regular periods of voicing. Now we turn to something complicated and interesting and maybe confusing. In a lot of varieties of American English and British English, the word initial voice stops are not very voiced at all. The contrast between ba and pa is carried more by the aspiration on the voiceless stops. And so even what you were just listening to in Thai, the Thai voiced ba should sound more strongly voiced than an English one. And you might have even thought that the voiceless unaspirated pa sounded something like an English voice stop. So in our discussion section, we'll be recording examples of English stops and looking at them in terms of VOT. The degree of voicing of voice stops in English is affected by, as Lisa Davidson says, phrase position, word position, lexical stress, and the manner and voicing of the adjacent sound. And if you're interested in more details, I've got a link there to her paper. You can also find variation across varieties of English in terms of how voiced the voice stops are. Both African American English and Southern White varieties have been claimed to have greater degree of voicing than in Northern, what gets called mainstream American English. There's a recent paper, 2009, that shows that there is much more voicing in the stops produced by white speakers in North Carolina than those produced by speakers from Wisconsin. And there's an even more recent paper that has some diagrams in the paper that should look familiar to us. These are from Pratt. And this is a study of African American and Caucasian American speakers from Mississippi. So the author of the paper is careful to say that she did not test for dialect, but it's likely that the African American, that the black speakers were in fact speakers of African American English. And this example is really clear. Now you can see here, this is we have we have a ba, so this is the phoneme ba being pronounced. In this study, it was after sonorant, so it was something like small bells, if that was a phrase. And in the white participants, it was most often very, very little voicing at the beginning, whereas in the African American participants, there was a significant amount of voicing. This almost looks more like the Thai ba that we were looking at, not quite as much amplitude, but quite similar in terms of the duration of voicing in this stop.